Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi addresses the Rohingya refugee crisis, saying her country does not fear international scrutiny. We'll discuss the plight and flight of the Rohingya right after this break. You are watching World Insight with Tai Wei, coming to you live on CGTN. Myanmar State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi delivered a speech on Tuesday about the ongoing violence in the country. This is the very first time that the leader broke her almost a month-long silence on the Rohingya refugee crisis. Suu Kyi stressed that the clashes can only be addressed by eradicating the weaknesses of human nature. She said Myanmar does not fear international scrutiny over the Rohingya unrest. The violence erupted in late August when Myanmar's army retaliated against the coordinated attacks by Rohingya militants. Since then, nearly 400,000 Rohingya Muslims have fled to Bangladesh to escape the fighting. They now languish in one of the world's largest refugee camps. Many global leaders have urged the resettling of those innocent civilians. UN Chief Antonio Guterres called on Myanmar to end the violence, which he said was best described as ethnic cleansing. Of course, those are the words coming from the United Nations. And to talk about what exactly is happening, has Aung San Suu Kyi's speech done anything to end the violence in her country? Let's loop in our panelists to find out. In Beijing studio, we have in here Song Qingrun, Associate Professor at the Institute of South and South Asian and Oceanian Studies from the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations. Welcome to our program, Mr. Song. Meanwhile, in Singapore, we have Lim Tai Wei, a research fellow adjunct of the East Asian Institute of the National University of Singapore. Mr. Lim, welcome as well. What exactly, I want to ask the two of you gentlemen, is the nature of this conflict? Is this about religion? Is this about politics? Is this about history that has never been settled? Mr. Lim, I want to go to you first before I go to Mr. Song here in Beijing. Mr. Lim.
This is a very complex conflict because there are so many elements involved and so many different perceptions. From the viewpoint of the government, they are dealing with some members of an insurgency. For example, groups like ARSA, which they accuse of a split as a splittist group in the Rakhine region. And at the same time, this whole thing is made more explosive because there's a religious element to it. The majority of Myanmaris are Buddhists, whereas the Rohingyas community are mostly Muslims. So some see a religious element or quality to this conflict. At the same time, there is also a social issue because there are human...
We have some problems at this point reaching to Mr. Lim, but let me come back to you, Mr. Song. Mr. Lim certainly lined out some of the perceptions that people are looking at this issue. Perceptions would always be there, no matter what. The question is, there is a crisis. How to handle it?
Yeah.
Ms. Suu Kyi has been very silent over the past almost 1 month, and now she finally spoke out. She seemed to enjoy a big support in her country on this.
Yeah. When I see some news about his speech, there are many people on the street or on the ground to watch the TV on the street or
right.
near the city hall. So she got a lot of support from the domestic people, especially from the Buddhists, because the Buddhist occupies about more than 85% of the total population. So it's very important for the government, for the country's stability. About how to handle it, because just as the professor said, the issue is very complicated. Simply speaking, the Buddhists think that the Rohingyas are the foreigners. They don't want the government to give the Rohingyas the citizenship, nationality. But the Rohingyas think that they live there for maybe scores of years or even hundreds of years. They should have the nationality. And the Buddhists think that the Rohingyas compete with them about the job opportunities, the resources, or so many other things. So the government is in a dilemma situation. If the government just satisfies the Rohingyas requirements, all of the requirements, or meets the pressure from the international society, the government will face another big demonstration from the Buddhists. The Buddhists occupy more than 85% of the country, so the government should think about the pressure from the Buddhist community.
It's very interesting to see this divide of opinions from inside Cambodia, from inside the country compared to from outside the country. Let's just say, particularly in Myanmar, the majority are supporting Ms. Suu Kyi and also how things being handled so far, which is merely to leave to the parties to resolve by themselves. However, outside Myanmar, you see particularly in the so-called international press, the criticism toward Myanmar is extremely strong. You also heard from the United Nations, even the Secretary General have been using some very sensitive words toward the situation there. So how should we understand, Mr. Song, inside Myanmar, outside Myanmar, this huge divide of perceptions?
Yeah, the issue is not just the religious issue. It's about politics, also about the Myanmar's relations with the foreign countries or the EU, UN, or other organizations.
Explain, please.
Yeah. So now I think the government, the Myanmar government should handle this issue, should resolve the humanitarian crisis in Rohingya Rakhine state, and also about the border area. This is very important to resolve this. But I think second, the Rohingyas or international society should be patient about Myanmar's actions, because this is very complicated and the situation there is very dangerous. So the Myanmar government needs time to resolve this issue.
I see, but Mr. Lim, this is exactly what some international community has been talking about. I mean, this is already a boiling conflict over there in the country. Lives have been threatened, and certainly so-called fairness, equality, all of these issues have been challenged as a result of the ongoing conflict. So according to others, issues have to be settled as soon as possible. And yet you also heard from Mr. Song, given all these complex issues, there has to be patience. How should we, in a way, weigh these two things all at the same time? Has the Suu Kyi government done things correctly with the right pace?
From the external gaze, from the international community, they are seeing a humanitarian crisis. Numbers of Rohingya, 400,000 of them, 10 times. So there is an urgency. Some national community to about the crisis. The challenge here, in accordance with interpretation of other, especially those in Myanmar, is the.
I see. There are still some problems
areas.
that we are
right now,
linking to Mr. Lim. There are some broken voices. So I want to come back to you, Mr. Song, about the same question.
Yeah.
Expectations very different.
Yeah.
The way people see the complexity within the issue also very different.
Yeah.
Priorities are also different.
Yeah.
So what will be the right pace coming from you as an observer?
Yeah. First, I think the Myanmar government and the international society should cooperate. Yeah. Friendly, not contradictory, to handle the human crisis in local state and the border area. This is a very important and urgent task. Second, I think the Myanmar government and the UN or other organizations or the Western countries should have some talks with the Myanmar government and also the Rohingyas, how to balance, different parties' requirements just as I said, the government just can't meet the requirements from the Rohingyas totally. But the Buddhist requirements should be carried. So how to balance the two camps or two groups of interest, this is very important.
Mr. Song, you also see that there has been a sea change of attitude. The so-called international community, particularly the Western countries, has and had toward Ms. Suu Kyi before she came into power as a state councillor and now. And she has become this very controversial figure increasingly in the descriptions of the press, let's just say Western press, if we could use that general term. How much of this is changing others' picture about Myanmar, about her as a politician, and how much she has grown herself, grasped what she believed as the fundamentals of her political existence and the peace and stability of her country? Mr. Song.
As an opposition leader, when Aung San Suu Kyi before several years ago, she is very popular in the Western world, just as a popular political star. But now,
a freedom fighter.
Now, when she took power for more than 1 year, now I think any politician should be realistic, including the Aung San Suu Kyi. So I think now she should consider first the Myanmar's most people's interest and requirements. This is very important for her government stability. Second, about the Myanmar's diplomatic principle and also the national interest. Because Myanmar is a country that, an independent country, it is not satisfied with foreign interference about his domestic politics. So this is also Myanmar's principle. So, but the Western countries always criticize the Myanmar's domestic affairs. Third, about the fact. Now, the Myanmar government, Aung San Suu Kyi, and also the international society quarrel about the fact who fired as the common people or Rohingyas, who fired their houses, what's the reasons, what's the causes, really let the Rohingyas to leave the country. So there are different opinions, there are different facts, there are quarrels. So this is the reasons, complicated.
While the debate is going on, Ms. Suu Kyi as a freedom fighter to a politician in governance, Mr. Lim, certainly has been changing the perceptions in the others' eyes, at least in the Western press. What do you make of that change, and how much impact will that have on Ms. Suu Kyi's relationship with other partners, let's just say from the West, and how much will impact her country's future relations with these countries as well? Very briefly, Mr. Lim. I hope it works this time.
I think the state councillor has a lot of pressures right now, because the pressures come from not only state leaders in the West, but also from human rights groups and former Nobel Prize winners. So she has to handle a lot of pressure at the moment, and at the same time, she has to look at the equilibrium within her own domestic political audience. Therefore, I think she's trying to calibrate her skills as a politician and also as a person who is handling a humanitarian crisis. This is going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy, but the first challenge that has to be overcome, and she has also mentioned it herself, is to increase access to these areas that are in trouble right now and to be able to see the situation on the ground. And she has tried to invite the Western media as well as groups to go down to see. And right now, many groups are using satellite photos and also some much narrower access. So I think access would be the most important point right now for different stakeholders to look at what is truly happening as a crisis.
Transparency is always very important. We have seen, but things are getting ever complicated because more than 900,000 of Myanmar's 1.5 to 2 million Rohingyas have fled to neighboring countries, and it's going to have a big impact on the neighboring countries as well. Bangladesh now hosts most of Rohingya refugees. In the past 3 years, tens of thousands of Rohingyas sought refuge also in Thailand, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, the Southeast Asian countries. On the other hand, the U.S. and Australia have also been approached but rejected settling Rohingya. Mr. Trump publicly U-turned on a pledge to accept refugees held in Australian camps. So the question is, Mr. Lim, well, others criticize Myanmar and criticize Ms. Suu Kyi. Have others done anything to help these people? Meanwhile, how will, given the complex situation, the others come to help and to support? After all, it is a refugee issue, as Mr. Guterres, the Secretary General, have also been talking about. Mr. Lim.
We have seen non-state actors come in to try to help. For example, religious leaders like the Pope has redirected a refugee ship from Libya to Myanmar. We have also seen Bangladesh trying to help in setting up the refugee camps, but of course this might be an opportunity for Myanmar and Bangladesh to work together, because Bangladesh itself is facing a very terrible monsoon season, and therefore there's an opportunity for them to work together to try to resolve the crisis that's occurring right now.
Right.
So we are seeing a combination of state and non-state actors coming in to try to help resolve the crisis, and it remains very much in flux right now. As I said just now, perhaps access is probably the most important thing right now in order to help these groups back to normality.
I see. Mr. Song, final words from you. Some solutions as access. However, there's also a sovereign state that we are talking about, the country of Myanmar. So once again, a very delicate balance. Mr. Song, 30 seconds if you can.
Yeah, I think to resolve this issue, Myanmar government and the Rohingyas and the international society, and including the UN and the Western countries, and also the Bangladesh or other related stakeholders, should be patient to have talks, how to think about how to resolve this issue, step by step, not just the quarrel and criticism.
Not just criticism, but real actions to help and to solve the issue. Always the best advice, I guess. Song Qingrun and Lim Tai Wei. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us.